Hey everyone, welcome. We also have a couple of new upcoming videos. So if you hop on over to monograph.io/webinars, you'll see that we have a couple of topics upcoming next week, same time on Tuesday, and the following week, same time on Tuesday, to dive a little bit deeper into some of the areas of our product. So today we're going to be focusing a lot on the project planning process and how that ties into profitability. We'll also be talking in the coming weeks about how to use forecasting and how to use resource more effectively to help you make better decisions on staffing. And we'll also be looking at timesheets and their effect on the money Gantt more specifically, so you can really keep track of some of that. We'll touch over some of these topics today, but we're really going to focus our conversation on the project planning aspect of it. Some of you in our audience are already existing Monograph customers, which is great. Some of you are new, so this might be brand new to you. For those that are existing customers, hopefully we can shed some more light on specific areas and provide some best practices, as it were. So with that, I also just like to introduce my co-host here, Chris, who will be helping us to make sure we're not on the wrong track. Feel free to add in the Q&A any kind of questions that you might have, and Chris will address them as we go, or we'll address it towards the end as it makes sense. For whatever we can't get to today, you can always reach out to me, George at Monograph, or just reach out to our support team in the widget that's either on our marketing site or in the product itself, and they should be able to help you there as well.
Yeah, and another thing just to point out is this is a more specific workflow that we're working through today. For a more general introduction, you can join the live demo. Our CEO and co-founder, Robert Ewan, will run through that. We do it every Friday. I'll post a link in the chat if you're looking for a more general overview of the product.
All right, with that, I'm going to share my screen. All right, so today we're going to cover how to build more profitable projects in less time with Monograph. As I mentioned before, we're going to be specifically looking at the project planner. So to start off with, why should we care about improving the way we work with project plans and just even the setup and workflow? It can help you win more work. Getting higher win rates on proposals with a faster turnaround time is pretty critical. So the faster you can actually turn around a proposal, the faster it can be seen by a potential client, and hopefully helps to increase conversion rates on that. It can also free up your time. This is also a really big point, right? Monograph wants to ultimately help you save time in almost every facet of, let's say, the back of house operations of your practice. And whatever you're not doing that's not designing, we want to be able to take care of that for you. And with the project planner, it's been very intentional to help you, as part of a cohesive workflow, help minimize the time it takes for you to get up and running, especially when we're comparing it with other baselines like things like spreadsheets. We also want you to wow your prospective clients. So this is another big part of what we're going to be looking over at today. It's that, how does a project plan become something that you can actually communicate and collaborate on? We're going to be looking at a specific piece of this, the shareable Gantt, but just in general, you can recognize that Monograph is looking to improve the overall client experience. So we're going to have one goal today, which is going to be helping you set up a profitable project plan. I just want to give you like a really brief little snippet anecdote from a case study of ours from Verdant Studio, firm based out of Rogers, Arkansas. I always have trouble whether it's Arkansas. But we have about 5 hours saved just on a very critical part of setting up projects for Thomas Merritt, one of the chief operating officer. We're going to power through my dog in the background. But essentially, Thomas was able to tell us that the time that it used to take him to set up a project before using Monograph was severely cut. It saved him a ton of hours on it, increasing productivity by 200% for him. And he would actually spend a lot of his Sundays setting up projects. So being able to get that time back just for him to spend time with his family. I'm sure many of you here in the audience are owners or managing directors or people that just spend a lot of time outside of, let's say, the bounds of the workday, setting up your team for success. And so the more we can help you give you time back to spend to the things that you care about most, that means a lot to us as well. So that's pretty critical. All this is kind of talking about helping you to button up your project planning workflow. So we're going to talk about a couple of best practices. The reasons why we want you to be able to see all of your data. So being thorough about how you plan your schedule, your fees, your hours, and your staff helps downstream. So this kind of like the initial setup is critical because everything that happens from here on out with Monograph is dependent on how you input your time at the very beginning. And so that's why we're putting a lot of attention and emphasis on this. We want to help you make plans faster. So we're also going to be looking over some of the workflows that help you do that, specifically with something that we've launched internally, or rather to our existing customers. Not so we haven't made too much noise about it externally, which is project templates. This, I think, is it's overlooked in the industry how important templates are, but you see it already if you work in BIM. Project templates are a huge lift on any given project. We want to be able to provide that even in your workflows for your projects. And as I mentioned before, wowing your clients is also a big part of what we want to help you do when it comes to providing a great client experience. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that as part of the workflow. Now, just stepping back, for those people that are not necessarily existing Monograph customers, and you're wondering, is this project planner even for me? What is this what we're about to dive into? You want to be able to, if you're interested in building profitable contracts and improving your project planning workflow in general, because you're using, as the other point notes out, you like using too many spreadsheets to do this. You have a spreadsheet for your schedule, you have a spreadsheet for your fees, for your budget, and you're trying to wrangle them all together, then this is a really good fit for you. And you'll see why in a minute. Now, when we think about profitability, right, there's a couple of drivers here that really impact it. Having healthy billable rates. Now, Chris and I know the conversation around billable rates goes into many different directions, right? A lot of people say you shouldn't be billing for your time, period. You should be billing on value. We completely agree with something like that. But at the same time, you need to be able to consider what's your internal billable rate, right? What is the billable rate that's going to keep the company moving forward? Now, and you can break that apart in many different ways. And over time, we're going to give you better tools to be able to see that. But ultimately, just thinking about how you bill is really critical. And it comes down to just even your billable rate. Locking in project profitability. Now, in the normal and recommended practice for building up a billable rate, right? You use a multiplier that embeds your overhead, so like 2.5. That number is always like a magic number that no one can pin down. But you hear about 2.5 to three times in order to give you cushion for profitability, for overhead, and then for the actual salaried rate of your employees. We also offer a different lens on that, which is basically to say, if you actually buffer in a very specific number on every project as a percentage, whether that's 5%, 10%, something that you're basically setting aside as a contingency, which is very well known in pro formas for large development projects. They have contingency fees because at the end of the day, you never know. Every plan, the saying is something along the lines of plans are useless, but planning is critical. That's a very similar mindset here. It's basically like you want to be able to set up something of a margin or buffer as we've outlined here. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we build up a project, just so that even at almost like a worst case, if you do hit let's say your allocated budget, you still have something left over that it's still there for contingency purposes. All right.
Yeah, I just want to point out that George, sorry to interrupt. This is something that you take off the table, you reserve to the side. It's not a part of the budget. Actually, take it away. Think about it as an untouchable part of the project.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks so much, Chris. And so the other driver here for profitability is just staying on top of your projects. We fundamentally believe that if you develop a proactive rhythm for overlooking your projects, and you do this with your team and you train them on this, even delegate responsibility so that they're also looking over the work, that is going to be really helpful. And we've seen it where, as another anecdote, we've seen it where things like additional services can get left behind. And what we mean by that is that clients build relationships with a lot of team members in your team potentially. And so they'll ask your team members, hey, can you send over another rendering of this view? Or, hey, can you send me the square footage calculation for this space? Or you're always getting inbound requests from a lot of different people. And so what we think is very important is for you to be able to stay on top of those type of requests and make sure you're very diligent about associating them as additional services. We've seen that really high performing companies financially high performing companies are that do this as part of their practice very like regularly. And that could be in partnership with a finance team if you have one, but it's ultimately being very rigorous about when you're invoicing, are you accounting for all of those things? And we hear it too. We know that a lot of people like to build a good client relationship by discounting or build a good client relationship by not overlooking those items. But really, if we're all talking about how important time is for a business, that's important to be able to track those things and actually, or at the very minimum, decide whether you want to be able to do that or not. But having that visibility and being able to teach your team and train your team to be critical about that. Now that could be outside of Monograph. It could just be some sort of practice that happens every week. We'll talk about how some of those things can come up through Monograph and through timesheets, but essentially just being aware that is a big component there. And we'll also talk a little bit about additional services as well.
And we know that it might be that in your current client relationships, you haven't set it up in your existing scopes to really be able to carve that out. But what's great about what Monograph can do is you can still capture that time internally so that when you make a proposal next time, it accounts for the in practice real services that you really should be scoping out.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Chris. We're going to go over 3 steps here for project planning. First, we're going to look at ways in which you can check your bandwidth. We're going to review the money Gantt as one aspect of that, the project plans that are upcoming, and then also look at team forecasts as another avenue. We're going to look at actually how to plan the project. And we're going to look at this in a couple of different ways. One from scratch, which we've covered in the past on our Friday weekly demos as part of the more generalized tour. We're going to really lightly touch on that real quick. And then we're going to look at more deeply into how to use existing projects to turn them into templates, or starting with, as an example, we might start off with one of the templates already in our demo account. And then the third aspect of the project planning is like how you actually share those projects with other folks. We'll go over the shareable Gantt, which is a really great way of being able to just quickly communicate with the client in real time, like where the project is at without having to disclose any financial information, just the Gantt chart itself. So are we ready? I think we are. Yes, we're good. Any questions so far, Chris?
No, and please feel free to write in the Q&A just as you come across a question, just we can capture it in the Q&A and get to it either live or at the end of the conversation.
Great. All right, let me just make sure I have my kind of list here of things we'll go over. All right, so welcome to Monograph. This is the landing page that you enter once you sign up for a trial account. We're going to go into a specific area called the demo account, which every new account has access to. But I just want to highlight a couple of things here. We already have a little bit of a checklist to guide you through the major touch points of using Monograph, like the main parts of the product that you'll want to have set up. We're going to focus a little bit on the projects area. Let's go to the projects page first, which is here on the side. So you can pop this out over here. You can hover over it. In the projects view, we're going to see it's empty. Actually, let me jump over to the demo because that's going to give us a better picture. So if we go up here, you'll see we have future standard. I just renamed it. It's the demo account. It should say demo account on your side. And by the way, it's your own demo account, right? So it's not a general demo account that everybody necessarily, we're not all on the same demo account. It's your own, right? So you can really see this as a sandbox to just create account or create projects, things that are not really critical to your company as a way to learn. A couple things here just to orient everybody. This is the main dashboard, specifically as an admin, so you get to see everything. We have a way of surfacing up just the major projects here that you have interfaced with. We have some other information here that we won't dive into, but just to orient that there's like we have a timesheet area, assigned tasks, and whatnot. As I was mentioning, we go here in the projects area, and what we'll see here is the projects page. I want to spend just a quick minute here orienting on what this would look like. So this is the end goal of where we want to be already, maybe a couple months into Monograph, a couple projects already established that are upcoming. We have different ways of actually allowing you to view this information. So you can organize it by alphabetical or project number, if that's a way. I'd like to see it from basically newest to oldest, right? So it's much more like allowing me to see the future of where things are going. You can also start to filter this out by different statuses. This is going to be a really important part that we're going to spend some time looking at when we create a project. But you have the option here to just look at projects, whether they're active, paused, which is important because we know that a lot of times, as I mentioned, things happen and project pausing happens quite regularly, right? And this past year, project pausing happened a lot for a lot of customers and in the industry at large. So it's important this was something that we thought was very important to allow people to do on their projects. And we can answer some questions related to that if they come. But you'll also see here completed and canceled. And so this will be helpful for downstream reporting to be able to look at, okay, how many of our projects were actually canceled? How many did we complete? It also has impacts to like what you can do from a timesheets perspective on these. So things like a completed project wouldn't allow for additional time to be added to it because it's assumed you've closed it out, as an example. We also have assignments. So this won't be as relevant to us in terms of what we'll be talking about. More relevant will be the category area, which we'll talk about in a second, and then also active phase types. So this will just narrow it down. I just want to see everything that's in design development as an example. And yeah, so we can exit out of that as well.
And George,
Yeah.
so what are we just looking at in terms of what these are? So you're looking at these different lines, they're broken up, they have things on them, they have a little marker at the top. What's going on with those?
So we're going to zoom in. Great question. So let's zoom into this project here. Sorry, fixed fee project, which is one of our template projects. And what you're seeing here is the Gantt chart that's created after you build the project plan. So it's a very simple line. What it's showing at the same time is a couple things. The phases, it's showing these milestones, which we'll talk about. We will lightly touch a bit. And then, and then it shows the progress. The one key thing here is the money Gantt, which basically this line here, this line that hovers over each of these phases, is the budget, the allocated budget for that phase. It moves in real time to the time that's been allocated to it. So in this case, here's a good example. In this case, for this phase, for SD, this has not yet reached the entire line of the phase, which means you still have time in your budget to actualize, to actually work on this project without having to go over your budget. And so the money Gantt, because this yellow line here is actually today's date.
We're a little bit off track in a sense, right? Because the money's behind the time so it could be that we have some budget left, but it also could be that there hasn't been enough attention on that project.
Correct. And so that the qualification of how that looks was more specific to the project progress, but at least it gives you a really high level view and visibility into, where are we at right now with any given project? And so you can see here, things in the future haven't yet been allocated any time. Now, moving forward, I'm going to just go into the actual category creation setup. As we mentioned before, here we have these different categories. I want to address a little bit also of how you can view this page too and segment into that. So let's say you're a company that has multiple offices in different markets, or maybe you have different studios. Maybe they're not in different markets, but maybe they work on different things internally, right? They might work on interiors or something else. And you want to be able to segment this and only see it based off of your own. If you're a studio in Miami, as an example, you only view projects in Miami. So the way we address that is through going through settings, and we'll just jump over to projects, and having this area figured out and organized for how you operate is really helpful. With categories, as you can see, I've added a couple here: Studio Baton Rouge, Studio Miami, Studio New York. So in this example, Future Standard, Chris and our firm is large enough that we have 3 different offices, and we want to make sure that we can see what each studio is working on distinctly. We also have different phases, and we already come with these templates out of the box. Same here with these categories. The only thing that's new here would be additional services as its own category. We also have it as a phase here for fixed, but I can come in here and say additional services, hourly, give it an abbreviation, and then say this one's hourly, just so that I can know. And so now I have a phase type that I can create on a project and have, time allocated, maybe not budgeted necessarily to that, but we can have as a placeholder, so we can put time against that and track it. Okay, so just important to highlight that these two will help us when we go back to projects and be able then to organize and see our project. So in this case, I only have one project in Miami. I'm the Miami person, so likely I need to bring in more work for the firm on that front. But that should help just give you an overview of the projects page and how it can be very useful.
So this is really step one, George. What
Yes.
we're looking at is, what is our portfolio of active projects? There's an ability to see proposed or paused projects as well. So the idea is that you're gauging your bandwidth in this view. Step one is just knowing what all of your activity and your future activity holds, so that you can evaluate, where do we even have bandwidth? Where might we even start a project?
That's right, exactly. And so right now we can see, okay, we have some space open. At least from our project side, we can tell that we have about 5 projects that are active right now. We have some upcoming. Well, hypothetically, we can take on, we think we can take on more from a project perspective, but let's look at our actual team structure. So I'm going to hop over to workload. There's a couple different ways we can look at this. So workload is one way. This is actually not the best way. Let me go someplace else. Let me go to reports, which we'll talk about in a second. Okay, so in the team forecast, let's say I'm talking to a client and I know a couple things. I know that they're interested in starting sometime in the summer on a project of some type. And what I need to know more is, do I have enough bandwidth to cover? And so in this demo, there's a lot of unequally distributed time here, but I'm just going to move this time over into the future and just look at, okay, what do things look like up to October? So between, let's say, I just want to see from July to October. Okay, I have new team members that just started with us, that 4 of them here that could look like they have some room. I know I'll reallocate some of these hours across other team members that might be available, but at least I have some sense that, okay, there's some bandwidth for some people within that time period that they're not working on projects. Okay, so that plus looking at the projects that were upcoming, right? Knowing how the quantity of projects, give me some indication, okay, that who the people might be that available to work on that. Obviously, you can then look at this for other purposes as well, because it is a broader forecasting tool. But just wanted to let you know that there's different places where you can gather this information. Over time, we're very much interested in figuring out ways to surface this up for you in very dynamic ways. But just wanted to give you a sense of what can you use now to get that. How does that sound, Chris?
Yeah, sounds good. So basically, it's the money Gantt, which is showing you all your projects, and you've got this team forecast, which is showing you the distribution of forecasted time in the future, especially in future months.
Great.
George, someone brought up a question. If you attach a category to a project and that category is no longer relevant or it's not accurate, can you edit that category or take it away? What are the ramifications of a change like that?
Yeah, for a category, you can certainly rename it. Going back to the settings real quick within here, I can go and change this, I don't know, to like Fort Lauderdale, which is nearby because I moved or something. But the ramifications of this is that it would update everything else. So as long as the category, you're okay with that historical change happening, then I think that's totally fine to do.
Can you add 2 categories? Can you add more than 1 category?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Okay, so it's more like a tag.
Yeah, so that's a very good point. It acts more as a tag. It doesn't have that you can use to filter out and understand and see your projects in that sense, but it doesn't have anything more beyond that, I'd say, at this point. But just know that if you do change it, all of your previous projects just get updated with that tag. Okay. So we'll just keep this as Fort Lauderdale then. I ended up moving. Cool. So from here, let's move on to creating a project. All right. So talk to a client. We're still in early conversations about what they're looking for. I have some rough idea of what the scope looks like. And so we're going to go and start to create our project. So there's a couple of different ways here we can do this. We can do it first by going into the create project flow, which let's just say that it's a townhouse project, or I don't know, I'm not very good with names, but we'll just call it townhouse. We'll give it a number based off of our firm or how we like to organize things. This is a really great new drop down that we have. You'll see here that we actually are a very international firm here. So you'll see we actually might have some products in London. But essentially what you'll see is a drop down of different templates, which we'll get to in a minute. But in this case, let's just say I don't have a template. I just need to get started. And so the only decision at this point will be whether it's billable or non-billable. I might want to change the color, but I'm fine with that. So I'll just keep it billable. Now, here in the project planner, what we're doing is we're bringing together your project schedule, your fees, your staff, and basically your budget all into one area. And so that's pretty complex in a sense, right? In the sense that we're bringing all these things and bringing together. And what we're doing here is making it very easy to get it set up. And so you're going to have two different ways to approach it, because firms like to do this in very different ways. And some firms already have some idea of how they want to structure from the top down. So you start with the budget. Some firms like to build everything bottoms up. They know they really just want to start off with just the line items in the contract. They know it's going to be the 5 phases, and then they're going to build up from there based off of other factors that they have in mind. So we have here a couple different areas. We like to just start off with the budget because this is much simpler, in that everything can go top down. So total fee, this is based off of how much fee is allocated for your services. So let's just say it's just to give it a round number, 100,000. You might have additional consultants. Right now, it's a single line item. So this you might have to roll up in another spreadsheet. But we very soon are releasing the capacity to add consultants and have this be a much more line item. So you can actually add specific consultants and it can all roll up into one easy number at the very end. But for now, let's give this also a kind of round number. It's a small townhouse. I don't need that many consultants at the end of the day. And so we're just going to use another round number here. Profit here. This is what we were talking about earlier. So like one of the drivers of profitability is just having that extra padding for contingency. And so here's where you want to input that specific number. The assumption here is that the billable rates that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes have already been ironed out. And this is now just to basically, for the sake of your team, take it away, take it off the table. Like it's out of sight, out of mind, but financially it's still there as your contingency. So we're going to move this and say like it's 5%. So now we have the final project budget. We're going to lock this, and then we're going to set it up. So now if we go up here, we can see we have the total fee, we have the project budget, which is now the remaining budget, allocated budget, which is open, and we have the percent here. So we're going to go to add a phase. And from here, we're going to go into like the bottoms up perspective, a little bit more. Okay, now we understand just adding specific phases and then building in the roles that are going to be part of that phase. So we can see here, we're going to do pre-design. We're going to do, actually, from here, I might want to also include the proposal itself. So we can drag and drop that. We'll also include, then from here, we can start to add some more phases from pre-design. Let's just do, yeah, we have schematic. Let's do, what else? Schematic design. We have design
development.
Yep. Construction documentation, and then construction administration. So from here, we might want to start to add roles here. So we have already preset roles. You can change these roles also. So I'll just go either in two different ways. One, you can either add a role specific for the entire organization. So you can add here like a role template. or you can go into the settings field here and actually, it's under team here, you can actually change here the roles. So by creating a role, you can also give it a billable rate specific to that role, which will help in the creation of the plan itself as part of that workflow. But I'm going to go back here and we're just going to use from what's here. So let's say in the proposal, we have the project, the principal involved in that. We might have a project manager involved in that. And then we might want to assign these to specific team members already. We will probably want to, for this, it's a fixed rate. I think we don't want to spend more. There's a couple ways we could do it. We could just do it more based on number of hours we want to spend. So I just want to make sure I'm only spending like 1 hour at max putting this proposal together, just overseeing it. Danielle's going to spend maybe 3 hours just working on it. So we have $700 allocated to this. We can block this, right? So now this is going to be taken out from the original budget and it's going to stay there. Moving forward, we just want to start to add some roles for pre-design. So I'm going to say principals involved in that, project manager, and then we have a project designer, right? And so then this flexibility that you're seeing right now, being able to add different individuals to different roles is really helpful for organizations that find themselves where on a given project, they need to put a principal on as a project architect for that project, or they need to bill at different rates. And so this is a very flexible system. We'll talk about how you can actually systematize this a bit further with the templates, but when you're first creating a project for the first time, this flexibility can be very handy. And so we had, as the project manager, Danielle's going to stay on this project, Emily. And then from here, we can start to say, okay, I want to go into, what is it here? I think we have the lock budget here. All right, from here, let's say best rate to do this would be like, actually, I know here we can do it from percentage here. So from here, I'm going to give it like 25% there. Going to give this 25%. And what you're seeing up here at the very top is this number starts to draw down. So we're also just going to give this 25%, just for purposes of this. We know that it might not look like this at all when you're doing it in practice. And so we have a remainder now of about something and change, right? 1 point something percent. Did I hit it? Okay, the 8%. All right, we got 100%. Obviously, this is just rough numbers. You'll figure out how to massage this. But essentially what you can do is start to see that we now have 100% allocated to this project. We have this. We can now start to go into the project schedule. So for here, you can start to see the date ranges pop up. This assumes there's different ways in which you can control this. So you can tie it together so that if one phase moves, the other phases move with it. And that's when it comes to link phases. But for now, we'll just focus on, we'll just say that these timeframes from June, or actually let's start from July to August here, we'll link this to the proposal phase. And we'll say that this starts later in 31st. We'll say this starts September. Yeah, September. And then the end date for this is, I don't know, November 31st, and so forth. When we're looking at the construction administration phase, this is the one last piece I want to talk about. You can also do this by hourly. And so here it's not so much about having a fixed budget as it would be having a sort of not to exceed, because we can't forecast for you. We can't give you, unless you have a number that you're drawing down from. It's very hard to give you any outward look into the future if there's nothing to divide against. So everything's really predicated on that. Otherwise, you would have, this number wouldn't show up at all in any kind of forecasting. So just something to note on that front. Okay, so we're gonna just say this is done for now. We're gonna go into next. This is the opportunity to be able to add more information about the project, more for internal communication purposes. You'll see here that you can start to add categories. So this is a project, let's say, that is under my purview here in the studio Fort Lauderdale. The other aspect to this is the shareable Gantt, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But from here, we're going to say that it's done. And so what you'll see here is that we have the proposal phase lined up. We have pre-design lined up, and we're going to move this over from an active phase to a proposed phase. And you'll see why in a second, because what I want to show is ultimately the effect of this. So what you can start to see, and obviously these will get updated when you do the whole schedule. We can jump over to a different project that has that, but essentially you have a different way of showing this project. So if I go to a project page, you'll see that townhouse is actually a dotted line, right? Represented as a dotted line. This is going to be really helpful to be able to start to filter out projects that are not active, right? You don't want to necessarily create too much noise for your team, or maybe you do want to be able to show them that transparency and be able to say, hey, this is the work that's potentially upcoming, but you can see that it's delineated a little bit differently. And so here you can basically only focus on that or focus on only actives. So it would actually remove that as well. And as I mentioned before, you can also see that it's also part of that studio. Any questions so far, Chris?
Someone's asking about use case for structural engineering firm.
Yes. So structural engineering firms do use Monograph, and we can probably follow up with, I think it's Marcus, on some examples of that.
I think that what we should do next is look at the template model.
Great. Log hours. We have another question here about logging hours to a proposed project. Currently, we do not allow you to log hours to a proposed project yet, but that is something that the team is looking into. That's a great question. Okay, so let's move on to the project templates aspect. So going to here on the top templates, we can actually just start off with one of these templates, which is based off of previous projects. So I can come in here and say, okay, I know that the way we're doing the fixed fee project is actually a really great way to organize it. So what we're going to do is just actually save this as a template, and we're going to call this fixed fee template. You can also do this in different ways. Some people like to say how much square footage on this project is, whether it's, I don't know, 30,000 square feet or whatever. So you have a lot of flexibility in how you want to name this. So we'll just say that's what it is. And here you can basically just start off creating right from the get-go. Super simple. Once you have a project set up, creating a new project is actually like very simple. So if I go here and I go to next, you'll see that we remove all this other stuff because it's basically creating this template. And so from here, it's done. Let's go back to projects. Let's go to templates. And now let's actually create a project from this template. So you can see here, you can save as project. And so here we're going to say, let's just say this is Townhouse Redux. It's based off of this automatically. Here we can actually change the total fee if we wanted to. We know how effective we can be with that budget, so we'll just keep it there. And then now you have a new project that's been created from a template. The really great thing about templates ultimately is that it gives you a way to just actively think about the processes behind how you plan your projects. And so everything from the people that you place on there, how you set up the teams, the number of hours you allocate. If you start to see that from the money Gantt, or how like the real-time impact of working like on these projects, if that has any changes that you need to update, you can always come back here and make those changes. So you can update your template and reuse your template and basically have your template be an ongoing practice that you do as a firm to improve operations. So this is now part of the project here. And I didn't put a number here, but you could assume that would show up there.
We have a question. Is there a way to distinguish between basic services and supplemental services?
Yes. So we kind of work around this in a couple different ways. One is through those categories that we talked about, where you can create a category for additional services. So you can basically create a distinct project, say like Townhouse Redux, as an example, could be essentially you can create a separate project that has as a phase, as the entire phase, it's the additional services phase that you saw we created in the settings field. So this whole thing would just be one phase that you can then bill against on either an hourly rate with a not to exceed cap, which you can increase over time. So that way, if you already had a predetermined, let's say, amount that you wanted to allocate for this, you could on that front. The other way to do it would be, you could have it as an additional line item in your project, but then you'd have to go back and then make those updates to the total budget to be able to reflect and pull from that total budget in a specific project. So what I mean by that is you'd go into here, you then go into edit and go into the project planner and start to change some of these numbers in order to then give you the room to be able to draw down from that additional service.
George, what does it look like when you share this with a client?
Now, let's say, all right, we have all this kind of ready to go, and we've signed a contract with the client, and we just want to give them an up-to-date version of this whenever. So when we go to general, you'll see here that there is the ability to have a project shareable link. When you click on that toggle, you can then copy this, and I'm going to move over to incognito. And now you have, this is the link that you can send your client. And we have found this to be really successful with firms that have that type of relationship with their clients. They just want to give them an up-to-date progress. And so that whenever any updates are made, actually in the project creation side, anything changes, that will be reflected in this in real time. So it's basically the first, you can think of this as the first step of improving the client experience that Monograph is focused on. Over time, we're really excited about evolving this to include more information and be a portal for communication between you and your clients. And
so what we're seeing here, we don't see that money Gantt, but we do see the phases across time, the length of the phases, and the milestones inside of those phases.
That's correct, Chris. Yeah. Okay, so moving back to, great. So I just want to also show maybe some other aspects of this too, going back to, say, the fixed fee project here. Some of the other things that are helpful to know once you're inside of a project, and this is where project managers can live essentially on a given project, basically being able to see where is project progress happening also financially across the different phases. So here you'll be able to see all the different phases. You can also drill down into a specific phase and see it broken out by role. So then it's a principal, they've already exceeded. Project manager has about a couple of some hours left. Project designer has some hours left of the budget to draw down. And you can always keep this part top of mind too, is that this project already has set aside contingency fee for it as well. And so this is just another way to be able to drill down even further from just the money Gantt itself, where you want to see additional information on each phase and drill down into it. I think that kind of about covers the surface area of Project Planner. We can basically move maybe over to some of the questions that we have.
Can you show different ways you are using milestones? Demos mostly have 25, 50%, et cetera. Are there options for how we tag these milestones?
Yes, yeah, definitely. So in a project, you can go into tasks. You can add new milestones to specific phases. So this is just out of the box, but you can definitely go in here and create milestones for your, yeah. And this can be milestones in some sense, can also be a deliverable that you want to provide. So the 25% is a good way of looking at that. But yeah, I don't know, maybe like permits, if you don't keep it as a separate phases, just as an example. And then you can add a description here, sending permits for review, create a milestone. And so this is now its own milestone with a description in it, which you can then create tasks again. So I can create a task for this and attribute it to, oh, I had to pick the permits. As an example, and this we can assign it to whoever's on this project and then add it on there. So it's created a task. So under permits, you have that task. So
Great.
It is one way in which you can also include all this information into the template as well.
We got another question from the audience. Once hours are logged, do they show up in the project progress or do they need to be invoiced first?
No, yeah, that's a great question. So within here in the project, this is reflective of the time that's been submitted. It's likely that we've seen different firms actually have pretty good practices around adding time every day. We've also seen it where they add it only on Fridays or Mondays. And we have ways in which you can basically, in the settings, you can also block someone from inputting time after a certain date, right? So let's say Mondays, that's it. If you didn't submit it, then you block, which then creates a feedback loop internally that they have to come and tell you that, hey, I didn't put time into it. But at any rate, all that aside, this money Gantt shows you time as it's been delivered, right? Or time that's been actually inputted into the timesheets. So it's all in real time in that aspect.
Another thing too to point out is that when you're logging time, when staff is logging time, it doesn't just go straight into the invoice. You have a lot of control over how much of that time is going to be put into the invoice. George, maybe we could go back to the slideshow just to review what we talked about.
So what we looked at today was 3 different steps. One is checking for bandwidth. So the different tools that are available for you to use, from the team forecasts to the actual project page, how to plan a project and different approaches to that. So going from top down, filling out from the budget, all the way down to different phases, how to add staff to different columns and allocate time according to that, and then how to create all that from a template once it's actually been produced. We also covered being able to create a proposal or share the Gantt itself. And you can even share that Gantt as part of a proposal, right? It could be like you have your separate document as part of your email. You have, okay, here's the proposed timeline as part of the shareable Gantt. And that's another way in which you can also enhance the proposal. Or you can use it throughout the life cycle of the project as well. Keep not just the client engaged, but also all their other stakeholders and collaborators. In terms of next steps, if you're new to Monograph and just this first time you're really diving into a little bit more about what we do, encourage you to sign up for a free trial, 10-day free trial at monograph.io, no credit card required. You can also sign up for Friday's webinar where we're going to cover some of this, but also some other aspects that we didn't get to, other parts of the product that we didn't get to. Everything that we covered is in the very simple sign up. So once you sign up, you'll have access to everything. We don't gate specific features. It's all available at once. And yeah, I think with that, for those that are already existing customers, thank you so much. We really rely on your feedback continuously to build and keep building a better product over time. And yeah, I'm really excited to continue the conversation in the next couple of weeks.
Thanks, everybody.